Hello, hello. Good to see you, Jim and Casey and Stephanie. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Nice to be here.
Great. Well, we're just going to give a few minutes here for our audience to log in. Feel free to jump on the chat and share your name, where you're from. And this will be the chat that we will be using for any live questions that anyone has. So we'll go ahead and get started in a few minutes, but great to see so many of you on the call so early. All right, we've got some Chicago, Portland, Park City, home of Harry Styles. Love the pop culture reference. Maybe next time we should ask everyone to say who's the most famous person from your town, other than yourselves, of course. Mexico, wonderful, wonderful. It's going to be a great session today. I'm going to go ahead and give everyone about one more minute to get sorted, and then we will go ahead and get started with our panel. All right, we are 3 after the hour. I am so excited to be hosting this episode of our GoProfiles GameChangers HR lecture series. So thank you everyone who's joining today live and everyone who will watch us virtually at a later date on the webinar. As I mentioned, please feel free to drop your name in the chat as you join. There will also be an opportunity to answer any questions, ask any questions of the group, and just learn a lot more information about today's amazing panelists. So now that we're in, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you. If this is your first time joining, welcome. If you have been here before, we're excited to have you back. This is a multi-theme, multi-episode series, and today is our 7th episode, so lucky number 7. I think big things are going to happen with this group today. We're going to be talking about tangible strategies for sustainable business growth that will empower remote and hybrid teams. And if you have any peers or colleagues that would like to join for this session or future sessions, please feel free to share them with our registration. I'll drop that into the chat here shortly. And we can go ahead and get started. So I'm going to move us to our next slide. So great. Just a couple of things, a couple of housekeeping announcements. I first wanted to thank GoProfiles, who are our sponsor. My company RadAI is a user of GoProfiles. We love them. We use them to enhance the way we collaborate, we celebrate. We actually have sometimes competitions to see who can get the most great shout outs. And it's really been instrumental in making our remote culture feel as though we're much closer in the way that we celebrate. And who am I? I'm Janelle Henry. I'm so excited to be moderating this panel today. I reside in the Bay Area, and I've spent the past 2 decades leading recruitment teams at Microsoft, Meta, and most recently RadAI, where I am VP of People. We are a fully distributed workforce all over the world, and I'm really excited to talk about today's topic about hybrid and remote work. So with that, I want to introduce some of our panelists. You can see their lovely faces here. We've got 3 amazing leaders joining us. We have Jim Miller, who is VP of People and Talent at Ashby, Stephanie Studebaker, who's Head of People at Guidewheel, and Casey Bailey, who is Global Head of People at Deel. Welcome, welcome. And I'd love to get some introductions from all of you. Casey, love to start with you. If you could share with us your first paid job, so think way back, and then share with us your most recent paid job and tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Deel.
Got it. Still hustling for sure. So my first paid job was when I actually got my license. I don't know if this is still a thing, my driver's license, when I was 15 in Texas, because a school bus had had an accident. So my dad said she needs to be able to drive her own car, and somehow we got it done. So my hustle for me and my dad to pay for my gas and everything was I had to take basically a string of neighborhood children to school every morning on my way to the school and then back in the afternoons.
You were the world's first Uber.
Yes, exactly, right. And then I worked at Uber, so
That's great.
It's full circle. Yeah, so that was my first paying job, and now I'm at Deel, and I lead the people team here at Deel. We've got just almost 7,000 people now sitting across 115 countries, so fully global, fully remote, and growing. So from those early days of driving people around to now trying to coordinate people across all of these time zones and geographies whilst in hypergrowth. But it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Amazing. Thanks, Casey. All right, Stephanie, great to meet you. Next, same question for you, your first paying job and what you're doing most recently at Guidewheel.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Steph Studebaker. First paying job besides like your classic babysitting jobs in high school. I'm going to age myself as is most relevant. I graduated from college in 2009 during the Great Recession. And at that time, a majority, I think only 2 in my business econ class at the time, had jobs lined up outside of school. Jobs just were not readily available. And so through a wonderful connection and alumni of the college that I went to, I was able to land a job and didn't know a soul, but I moved down to Atlanta, Georgia, worked for State Farm Insurance. I was an underwriter. So I was, a 22-year-old telling people that we weren't going to accept their policies.
Oh, no.
So it was, my skin grew so thick. And what I love about first jobs is they make you realize what you want to do, what you're good at, and they might refine and change over time. And I realized I was not a great fit for that job long term. And it, every job gets you closer and closer to where you're meant to be. So right now I am, fast forward, I'm head of people at Guidewheel. We are essentially in like an AI technology Fitbit that can fit on any factory machine and improve efficiency for manufacturers across the U.S. right now. So it's wonderful to be here. We're a global company right now, fully remote.
Amazing. Well, you're probably also stellar at tough conversations from those early days at State Farm, right?
Exactly.
Well, it's great to have you. And last but certainly not least, Jim Miller, VP of People and Talent at Ashby. Jim, great to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Great to be here. Thank you very much, Janelle. So my first paid job was in the green grocery department of the local grocery store. And I used to go down 2 or 3 nights a week and then all day on a Saturday. And of course, it was my job to do all the cleaning at the end of the day. So I have a great appreciation for anyone that has to deal with mountains of cauliflowers. Fast forward from that, 25 years in various people and talent roles, and I lead the people function here at Ashby. And we're in 22 countries already, which is just mind-blowing to me. And we're an asynchronously remote company and passionate about it. So I'm really looking forward to talking about some of that with you all today.
That's amazing. Thanks so much. And it sounds like we're all working in somewhat remote companies, which I think will make today's topic really, really special. So I'm going to go ahead and move us along. And so today's discussion points, we've got a lot of really great things to talk about, and I'm really excited to have this crew to do it. So we're first going to be talking a bit about scaling culture amid rapid growth. How can organizations maintain unity and productivity as teams expand? How do we boost employee satisfaction and retention? I know that's something I'm really spending a lot of time on right now at my current company, which is how do we keep people here, especially as so many places are shifting back to return to office. And we're seeing, lots of different studies come out about whether remote work is the best thing that's ever happened or, some are leaning towards the other side of things. Streamlining distributed communications. What tools are we all using that we can maybe share with the audience and each other to reduce miscommunications across remote teams? How do we prevent burnout and support well-being? Such an important topic, especially when you can theoretically be on all hours of the day when you are working, at a remote company. And then last, adapting leadership for remote environments. How do leaders show up and manage hybrid teams with empathy? So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so I can see all of these lovely humans on the board. And let's see, there they are. Great. So we've got a couple of questions here, and I'm just going to let whomever is feeling most excited jump in. So the first one is, what are the biggest challenges organizations are facing when scaling culture in a remote or hybrid work environment?
Okay, I'll go. So I don't know, maybe we're the one that has the people in the most countries. Yeah, so we average like anywhere between 110, 115 countries that we have people sitting in. And when I started back in 2021, we were only in maybe 35 countries then. So we've just continued to live our vision and mission of being able to put people anywhere. But with that, as you mentioned, and I'm sure others see in this type of environment, no matter if it's one other country or if you're just in the US and it's one other state, if you're working remotely, there's naturally the things around connectivity, how to teach your organization or enable or further your organization to be async. We're just here, I'm in the UK because we've acquired a company, and we were just talking with them, and one of the things they're asking is, can you teach us how to be better async, right? How do you think about the people and empowering and engaging them and enabling them to work in that async 24-hour, 7-day a week, multiple time zone environment, but take real ownership and autonomy over being able to do that, and then having the trust, but also the empathy that everybody else is working like this too. I think that's one of the things that we've seen specifically in people, honestly, in people that don't work out or don't even come, because we've been so honest about what it's like to work in our environment. I always take that as a win, is just, you've got to have so much self-discipline, right, to work in this environment. We could wake up every day, right, and just be on Slack, and that be the only thing that we do in a day, with Slack being our office. So how do you, not just lead from the top, but how do you communicate? How do you be transparent? How do you enable and support that work? And how do you quickly onboard, especially new people, into the environment so that they can trust that it's okay to work like that? Everyone's working like this, and to trust that it's like that ongoing game of football where people are coming on and off the field, people are getting water, people are leaving on the emergency cart, maybe whatever's happening, and things are going to be happening for you internally and your customers. But everybody is working like that, and everybody is working their own day. And that's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about, because that is challenging if you're a super Slack heavy culture and you're not going into the office. And so how can you build those connections so that, one, people are very ingrained to your values and mission, but they have the trust, empathy, and support of the full team, including their management.
I love the off the field analogy. Thank you. I'm definitely going to borrow that one. Anyone else have thoughts on that?
To me, it's you've got to be incredibly intentional from the get-go with the written word to make sure that everybody sees the documentation so that they can norm on it. To Casey's point, people don't trust that that's the way that everybody else is working. So we've gone deeply into helping people understand, here are operating principles. So you've got a framework, so you don't have to wait for somebody to come online in order to decide what to do next. And we go even deeper into like communication norms. So this is the use case for Slack. This is the use case for email. This is your use case for Google Docs. This is a slab, and helping people understand and see that, but it's all written in its own right and then published across the company. And then again, we talk about it deeply before anyone joins to make sure that they're going to be comfortable and they understand what they're letting themselves in for, because it's not for everybody.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. We had something interesting happen a couple of weeks ago at RadAI where, we were having a really deep discussion on Slack, and as a fully remote company, right, these Slack threads can get so long. And someone said, is it okay if I call you on the phone? And I said, yes, phones still work. They still work in Slack. Absolutely. Let's get off Slack and just jump on the phone and talk about it. But I think, to your point, Jim, sort of creating a playbook or how to communicate is, wildly important. A follow-up question to that one: how do you think HR leaders can ensure new employees feel connected to the company's values from day one?
I'll start if that's okay. So talent acquisition is my heart and soul. So I think a lot of it comes down to setting the expectations and hiring towards your company values in your hiring process. I think about how distributed we are as an organization right now, all across different countries, different time zones. But the thing that doesn't change is how we're hiring towards our values. And everybody goes through, yes, our software engineers are going to have some different types of interviews as for instance, our AEs or our sales folks. But at the end of the day, everybody's going to go through like a core value interview that makes sure that we are fully aligned with who we're bringing on board. So the values are clear from even before day one of what's most important to our organization. And to double down on that, it's reiterated on a monthly basis for us in our company all hands. We have nominations for a specific employee who shines in one of our core values every single all hands. So those are some ideas that come to mind.
Thanks so much. Another follow-up question. How do you feel managers can reinforce culture across distributed teams? And, this came up for me just last week, actually. We were having a conversation because our company size has grown from 80 to 160, right? Very quickly. And someone came to me as head of HR and said, how can the leadership help the culture, right? How can we ensure that the leaders are helping keep the culture? And I find that a challenging question to answer because on one hand, I do feel as though I have an outsized responsibility as a people leader, but the culture will be decided, right? Not by myself, but by everyone else. And so how do you all think about managers and leaders owning and driving what culture looks like across distributed teams?
A wise HR leader said to me once, if HR needs to own the culture, then you've already failed. So we should stay well clear. I think the culture is driven from the founders, generally, if you're a founder-led company like we are. And it's really important for the workforce to have the connection there, especially the leaders. So for the leaders to hear from the founders and the senior leaders across various different functions around how they're approaching the way of working within the company, and hearing that consistency and then being able to talk with the same language down through the organization. I think, again, that level of intentionality is important. So bringing people on during their onboarding into those conversations and exposing them to understanding how the existing leadership think about things, you can get to a good start that way.
I couldn't agree more. Thanks, Jim. Casey, did you want to come off mute?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's so critical to that people are constantly seeing how leadership acts, because when it's contrary, right, to your values, then you've either not been honest in your values or it's time for a values reset, because the values should really be the cornerstone of how you act, how you make decisions, how you're going to solve something for a customer, what product you're going to, everything, right, should be driven by those values. And I think that's the first warning sign that maybe your values are off if you don't have, that same follow through from leadership down.
Agreed. Great. Thank you. Let's move on. So as we think about, other strategies and challenges and opportunities that we have in hybrid work models, how can organizations boost employee satisfaction and retention? Would love to hear from anyone who has some things that have worked or even things that haven't.
Okay, I can jump in again. So we're actually, like just what you described, right? You went from 80 to 160 people. You've doubled your workforce. And I think specifically for those that are in organizations where you're doing a lot of hiring and you're watching those key metrics. And one of the key things that we watch is average tenure. We've gone from 6 months average tenure, and we finally have gotten it up to 16 months of average tenure, but we hired 2,800 people last year, right? And we're just continuing to grow. And when you have something like that, whether it's a doubling of your workforce or any type of time where you're hiring a lot of people that's driving that average tenure, you still have to think we've got people that are coming upon 4 years, 5 years. We've got people that are brand new joiners. And I think it's so impactful to be able to really look at that full journey of workers. And we've decided to break it down just looking at the first 12 months, everything that happens to a person at our company, so that we can understand the moments that matter. Where do we need to intervene? Did the person change managers 5 times? Did their leader leave? Did they inherit direct reports? Oh, did we have a performance cycle? They didn't do well. They did well the next one. And really understanding everything that might happen along that journey so that you can build your retention, your engagement. You can bring and drive strategies where you have 4-year tenured engineers that you need to speak to on career development in a different way than you do those brand new joiners that are just thinking about ramping into this environment. So I think you can't be intentional enough with looking at that journey and everything that's going on and understanding you may not tackle some of it right away, right? You might put it on the back burner, or you see the future about something that's coming, but we don't need to tackle it yet. But what are those key things that are either driving the engagement up or driving the engagement down, driving attrition, driving development conversations, internal transfers, and then making decisions right in your people strategy about how you want to address those.
Thank you. Could I ask a follow-up question on that? Are you transparent with people within your company when you say, this is what we're trying to solve for? We're trying to, people are staying 6 months. We now want them to stay for 18. I'm curious how you tackle that kind of level of visibility, because there are some leaders who think by sharing that information, you're leading the witness, right? You're implying that maybe this is something that people don't want to stay at. And then there's a whole other school of thought of be transparent and open because everyone's feeling it anyways. Would love to hear your own experience with that.
Yeah. I mean, here we've been very transparent. So we do a couple of people-led town halls per year where we share out all of the core metrics that we're measuring and monitoring and actually explain to people, like the average tenure one, we've been very transparent around. Here's where our average tenure is. Here's where it's been over the past 3 years. And here's what this tells us that we need to deliver from you. And this is how you've told us here's what you've told us is important to you. And here's how those things align, or here's how they don't align and why. One example that we had from our management group was we were tardy in delivering manager training. We really we didn't have all the right people on the team to deliver it. We didn't want to outsource it. We needed to go build the team, bring the people in. But also we wanted to do more than basic manager training. We wanted to do managing at Deel, which is managing async with empathy, trusting, time zones, getting a question, can I take time off on Friday? I don't know, what country are you in? What's your PTO accrual? I mean, there's so many things, right, that you have to go through just compliance-wise as a manager. And so we really wanted to do a good job, and we were late, getting it out. And so but we needed to explain to people, yes, we want to help enable you to be a manager. We know that this is driving some of the attrition that we've seen in specific groups, but we also want to get it right. And so being very transparent about that project roadmap and how we're going to deliver it. So for us, we've chosen to be transparent in those metrics and then tie them together with what we're going to deliver, or understand if it's something we need to reprioritize in a different way because of something else or some other feedback, that we can move quickly to do that.
Thank you. So I have a follow-up question for either Steph or Jim. How can companies tailor their benefits and perks to support hybrid employees effectively? What have you seen that's worked?
Jim, you want to take this one?
Sure. Well, I'm probably counter to it in that what we've focused on is trying to have a very core set of benefits that can serve the masses, rather than trying to diversify our benefit suite that then gives you benefits that only suit certain people in certain countries, certain demographics, whatever it happens to be. So we've very much focused on maximize the absolute core that we can offer to everybody, rather than trying to create some kind of tailored solution. And I think really that's helped with the way that people feel about the fairness of it. Obviously, we're an American company, and that could dominate quite comfortably the whole benefits conversation. It's like, yes, you could have this, but you're in a different country. We don't do that. We try and focus to make sure everybody gets the same, most impactful set of benefits. So that's the philosophy we've taken.
Great, thanks. All right, next question, and I'm sure this group's going to have some hot takes on this one. What are some best practices for streamlining communications across distributed teams? I think, there's so many vendors that are popping up, at least in my LinkedIn daily and weekly, of you probably need to know how to do this and do that and fix this and fix that. What's working? What should our listeners and viewers hear about?
I just threw a resource into the chat.
Great.
So this is our public communication blog that talks about those use cases that I mentioned earlier, and the reason behind it, and how inefficient communication is a default state, and helping people understand that every communication you'd give is a tax on the other person and on their time, and their timeline doesn't line up to you. And it's just bringing that awareness to the whole of the employee base to help everybody interact in the most effective way possible, so that what you're choosing to do doesn't impact somebody else. So I'll leave it on the side, and anyone who wants to can have a read.
I love that, Jim. Have you heard the phrase, an email is just a to-do list written for you by somebody else? So I very much, and I'm not perfect with this by any means, but I really try to block my core working hours and only check email. And I'm notably horrible at checking Slack. My team knows that they need to call or text me if anything is urgent. But I really try to get my core focus time and those core hours where I'm most efficient carved out on the calendar, and to avoid unnecessary communications at that time. And I encourage my team to do the same.
I think that's a great call out. And whenever I onboard into a new team or take on new directs, something that I've used that's really helped me out is I create my own communication guide of how I like to work, and I ask my directs to do the same. Right? To your point, Steph, you can always catch me on text. You can always catch me. These are my Slack hours. This is how I can be most efficient, and it shouldn't be a signal that everyone needs to. No one can compromise and everyone needs to be wildly difficult. But I think the way I see it is, how do you get your manager in a pinch, right? Where do they typically go first thing in the morning? Where they tend to draw their eyes? And then how can you adapt your style, right? So that everyone's kind of working the same hours, solving the same problems, rather than, operating off of 19,000 different platforms, which I think at last count, that's probably how many some companies are using these days. As a follow-up question, how do you balance asynchronous and real-time communication to maximize productivity? Obviously, we all work in highly remote environments, and so all time could be on time. What are some best practices or balance that you've taken on in your own life or your team's life?
I think we have a lot of obsessed workers here. We were actually just talking about that in an earlier meeting. Why are people so obsessed with their jobs? It's good, but sometimes we need to put practices in place or enable the managers to help people tone that down. We might give them all the permission around, you've just been in surgery, you've just done this, you're on spring break with your kids, you do not need to respond. But still there's that deep ownership that you're proud that they have, right? But then you also want them to be able to disconnect. So if they're not able to disconnect, is there a root cause to solve, is always my question. I just had this on my team. If she feels like she has to answer that instead of somebody else on her team, what's breaking? Why can't someone else answer? So we're doing some interesting analysis around that actually across the company, because there is so much, again, that ownership that we want people to have and is important to have in this remote work. But we need people to be able to log off and to take the time off and to feel confidence in taking that time off, that they're not blocking someone, or that, they're not the speediest one to answer, that it's okay to let people wait. So lots of engagement through Slack, obviously, as we all have, but how do you change those behaviors without toning down that strong ownership and that obsession, if you will, with the work and the excitement around it and engagement with, it's okay to let other people default answer, or to solve those problems to enable other people to be able to answer. That's just something that we're going through. I'm curious what's happening for the rest of you.
I think every company is struggling with this now. We experienced it as whiplash in 2020 when everybody had to go remote. And for those of us who remain remote, now the goal is, how do you still work asynchronously, not burn out, let people know your hours, et cetera? There's a lot that our teams are trying to tackle. There's no one set answer, but some things that we've put in place. Google, your working hours within Google is helpful for folks to understand, oh, okay, I didn't even think it didn't register. They're in a different time zone. Setting expectations, this is where it comes to the manager of, hey, is it reasonable? Let's agree as a team. We won't send a Slack after, or we won't be checking Slack after 6 p.m. If you need something urgently, we're doing important things. We're not saving lives, but if something's urgent, call me, text me. And setting those boundaries for yourself and your team is critical to prevent burnout. The one other thing I'll add, some people love working throughout the weekends. Like they just love it. Like they love accomplishing things. And we can, I recognize those folks. I honor that. And they also go in with the expectation, like, I know I won't get responses at all times, and they can schedule sends, but also recognizing we're all wired so different. And for some, they might need that to get through their weekend.
Those are great suggestions. I think one of the things we're noticing at RadAI, we also have unlimited PTO, and we're a fully remote company. And we were noticing that people weren't logging their PTO fully because they were sort of working, right? You were working an hour and you don't feel like you need to log it because you're actually working. It's kind of like the difference as a parent now of taking a trip versus a vacation. A trip is the thing I go on with my children, right? And I'm very busy. A vacation is when I unwind and I get, I turn off my computer, and reminding people that just because you have unlimited X, Y, or Z, that you should be creating clean lines so you can actually recharge, even if it's for a day or two. But there are some people that want, like to your point, Steph, want to work while they're on vacation because it provides them some sort of relief or satisfaction or safety, knowing that, they're not going to miss anything. But how, I think it's up to us as leaders to kind of be beating the drum saying, it's okay. It's okay. And also follow my lead. I'm going to show you that I'm also going to go on vacation and not check email and not check Slack, which then signals to people, I probably should be doing what Janelle's doing. Jim, I saw you came off mute.
Yeah, I was just going to peel back a level on the document that's sent out there. It's taking the decisions out of Slack and those urgency pieces and actually bringing them down to a document so that the document contains the context, so that more people have got the capability to help with that decision. And then enabling the comments and the asynchronous nature of it and that document to actually be the timeline, and folks knowing that people are at different parts of the world, different time zones and different reaction times to these things. I think that Slack generates in its own way a sense of urgency to it. And therefore, if that's not required and you can bring it into the document, just takes the edge off a little bit. So that's one piece. And the other is non-negotiables for individuals. And the more that you can be intentional and enable people to make their statement of non-negotiable things. I've got 4 kids. I try and cook dinner every night for my children. If I can do that, then and tell everybody that's what I'm intending to do, and this is the time that I'm doing it, it just helps everybody else see that that's a pathway that's an option for them, whatever their lifestyle and situation is.
I love that. I love that. I think we used to call it at Facebook, ruthlessly prioritize, right? You need to ruthlessly prioritize the things that matter to you and make sure that they're known to others so you can protect your time, because it's just such a slippery slope, right? It starts off here and then, things creep in and you're working around the clock. Well, it's very timely next segue, because what I'd love to ask about next is burnout. Right? Burnout. It's rising. It's really hard to solve. It means so many things to different people. Steph, to your point, some people really love working and maybe that's their norm, and others aren't used to working around the clock and are finding it really hard to keep up. What proactive steps do you think organizations and leaders can take to prevent burnout, especially in remote or hybrid teams?
I have a couple of thoughts here. Going back, it starts with your leader and getting crystal clear on your own boundaries as a leader to make it the norm for others to talk about it. So, for example, when I take vacation, I will do my best and lead by example and fully check out and create a doc to allow my team to know what's being worked on. And then I have the peace of mind to be able to do so. I also monitor how often my folks are not taking time off, and encouraging. At my old company, we had a wellness day implemented once a quarter, where it was the expectation you're going to take a day for yourself to do something that brings you life, whatever that is. And so even most recently, if I see somebody on my team has not taken time off in the quarter, I'll ask them, hey, when do you plan to take your next day off, and encourage that. Again, like everybody's wired so differently, but you want to lead by example as a leader here.
Something that we saw when we were looking at either people going on long-term leaves, like in the Netherlands, for example, because of burnout or stress, or even through attrition or just team member engagement data, was that the root cause problem to solve wasn't always necessarily, in some cases it was taking the time off, but in other cases it was more around being a single point of failure within the organization. So we took it a step back to look at our broader workforce planning as we're growing up a little bit as a company, and to say, okay, if we're doing workforce planning really well, then where do we need to build in some of these redundancies, specifically like in our payroll operations business, right? Where a ton of ownership over, you've got to deliver the payroll for a customer. But if you're the single point of failure or the only person that knows how to do payroll in the Netherlands, then that's not going to work. And we looked at that across the company. Again, there were a host of different things that came out, time off being one, monitoring that, living that, improving our time away from off systems, being able to automate it to put time off on your calendar and your managers and your teams, everybody knows you're off, and those things, enabling the time off, but also solving that root cause of just, again, redundancy, single point of failure, bringing in other people that can also do that job. Some of the documentation, like Jem's been talking about, we could get so much better at that, but beginning documentation so that people have a source of truth, a knowledge base to be able to go and get those questions answered when other people aren't available, or to get it in a more speedy way to not be a roadblock. And so that was causing, again, we found just a lot of different things that were causing that burnout piece and driving people to different decisions regarding their employment. So some of those things have helped.
Yeah, I love the call out of the singular point of failure, because there's been so many conversations I've had with employees who say, I can't take time off. Janelle, I can't take time off. And I say, of course you can. And then they explain to me that they are the only person that keeps this one light switch on, right? That keeps the company running. And then you say, oh yes, you're right. I see what you're saying. And then that takes time. And so I think having those conversations up front before everyone gets burnt out is wildly important. Jim, did you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, they're also stopping the rest of the company seeing that signal that they're the only person keeping the light on. So that forcing mechanism, of making people take the vacation so that you can see the gaps, it's risk mitigation for your organization and driving in there, helps with your headcount planning. And then again, like going even deeper into these things that we all see and we do, headcount planning, for example, but it's spotting those situations where our own planning is causing these situations for our employees. What can we do to mitigate that? How can we look at the situation? And it's generally fast business growth that is going ahead of the timeline that you already originally planned against. So take away time. Bring your headcount planning in line with your business growth rather than quarter-based plans. Little tiny changes like that as you iterate on how you think about structuring your business can make enormous strides in helping the rest of your workforce not be overwhelmed by the success that your company's having.
Thanks for sharing. We've done something else at RadAI that I loosely borrowed from my days at Facebook, which were planning all company PTO days, because one of the things that we were noticing with our employees in a fully remote company that has unlimited PTO is we would say to someone, well, Steph, you should take PTO today. And they would say, well, it's not me that I'm worried about. It's everyone else in the company that needs me. It's just going to keep churning and churning. And so we have tried to surprise and delight a couple of times throughout the year where we say, all right, we're going to tack on an additional all company PTO day to an existing 3-day weekend, which has allowed everyone to take a little bit of breathing room, right? Because they know everyone's going to be off. Obviously, those are costly decisions, but they've made a big difference in, I think, understanding, to your point, Jim, right? Where are these gaps? Is that even possible? Could we do this as a company? And going through that rhythm has allowed us to better workforce plan. Well, thank you for that one. All right, next question. So as we're moving along to thinking about management styles and just general support, how should leaders adapt their management styles to better support remote and hybrid employees? Are there things that we should be doing that are more important in a hybrid work environment than they would be in a traditional in-office experience?
consistency in frameworks for me. The more consistent you can be, the more that you can build out the frameworks that enable people to operate within them without having to come back and ask you or wait for you to be there, the better the performance of your team. And then the consistency in how you treat the output from that. If there is a mistake, if there was a misdirection, that it probably wasn't the individual's fault. It was more the communication that you'd given, the documentation that you'd written, and then polishing that continuously. I think that's one of the key pieces.
Well, I'll love that. And I'll add on, viewing your team as humans and not job titles is one of the biggest for me. I realized one of the hardest things about working remote is you feel like you're given a 30-minute Zoom window and then that's it. So once you get on Zoom, you're like, we got to knock out like 8 different things on our one-on-one agenda. There's so much to get to. And being intentional about, first and foremost, this is a human. So like, tell me about your weekend. I, typically bring a random question of the day to my people team meetings to like learn about each other and to invest in each other as humans, to know each other better, rather than just diving right into the one-on-one, which I could easily get involved with doing right away.
Great. All right. I think we have one more question here. So let's jump in. Actually, I think we have time for 2 more. What role does technology play in enabling remote and hybrid team success? Jim, thanks for sharing that initial, the rubric. I'm sure you have some opinions on how technology can help solve so many of these problems.
Turning it off. Like I try and take Slack off my phone as much as I can. Sometimes, like last week where I was traveling, I do have it, but I keep the technology separate from life. So I'm in an office space. I'm lucky enough to have a separate space. So when I log in, I'm present at work. And then when I'm not checking my phone because there isn't a message coming through. I'm able to spend the time with my family. And I use technology, therefore, as almost like just a way of delineating responsibility. But it's the hardware versus the software. But I think your intention was to ask about the software.
Yes. Anyone else have anything to add to that? Stephanie, Casey?
Honestly, I think it's something we've been trying to solve. Like, how can we leverage our HCM or our HRIS? Where do we deliver internal communications? How do we make sure everybody gets it, right? Like general Slack, okay, even that gets too overly populated, right, throughout the week. So I think for us, it's that internal communications is something that is iterative, right? Continues to have to evolve, but we're looking at how do we leverage more productization of our knowledge, productization of our communications, but in a place where people want to go. Not necessarily your homepage of your HRIS is always like the most exciting place to be driven there, but
Sure. Could
that change, right? Like, could you drive people there? What are you putting there? How is AI flowing through that? In our business, for both customers, our internal team members trying to find out information for customers, internal team members trying to find out information from themselves. We're really trying to understand where we can overlay AI to get those fast answers, but also to deliver comms or prompt people with remembering that a comms was posted in a specific place. So definitely not something that we've solved, but I think becoming more of a challenge as you get bigger, as you get more distributed, and just wanting to make sure that people have the right information at the right time in the right place, and what's the right technology for that in any given moment is a challenge right now, because it can't just be Slack, right? It's going to get too lost.
Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot about the technology and the structure and how we prevent burnout. How do you foster a sense of belonging and inclusion in hybrid and remote teams? What are some of your go-to strategies?
I think you have to create the opportunities for people to get together and not talk about work, whether it's the donuts in Slack. We're, as I say, asynchronously fully remote, but we also bring every department together at least once a year. and then we bring the whole company together once a year. And that's something that everybody seems to look forward to, certainly from the surveys that we ran after the last whole company offsites, and just like creating the space there that it's not all about work, but over the course of that week, there are opportunities for people who would never normally able to interact with each other to get together, to talk, to chat, to get to know each other as humans. Those things are critical. And if you can't have the water cooler moments, you've got to be able to create them. And those are the things I think people miss. So we've worked very hard to build that.
It's such good advice, especially for companies who may be planning their annual offsites. We do the same thing. We bring our company together at least once per year. And last year we got feedback that the meetings were too business-like. They were too packed, full of information. And I get that desire to say, well, we only get together once per year. We need to cram every element that we can of problem solving and strategy in it. And the company said, time out. We just want to hang out. We want to walk around the hotel and grab a drink and socialize and just talk and be silly. And so we made sure that we had extra time and a lot of it, and that our sessions actually ran early, just to your point, Jim, to kind of simulate that water cooler experience of when a meeting ends early in real life, you would go wander with someone. When a meeting ends early in Zoom, you log off and you immediately go back, heads down, starting to Slack, get on your next one. Steph, Casey, anything you'd like to add in terms of how you build inclusion in a hybrid work environment?
One thing that we've done for our company all hands that I'll incorporate here at Guidewheel is celebrating milestones for individuals, like outside of work and the typical promotions that you celebrate. So highlighting any trips if folks got engaged. And to celebrate that, we're small enough right now. We're a team of about 90, but celebrating that company-wide. So that you have like, oh my goodness, Sam went to the Bears game in London. Like, I should talk to him about that. I'm a Bears fan. Little things like that can form almost like a sense of community, and you feel closer to somebody just by being able to be present on that all hands.
We also stood up 2 perks that it might be worth sharing. So one, we heard the same feedback. Like we don't have a full company offsite. Too big, too expensive. Not to say it won't ever happen, but not right now. We do have teams that go on offsites, but really in our talent acquisition cycle, we share, like, you might not ever meet your manager or you might not ever be called to an offsite, like, to set that expectation. But what we did instead was we gave the autonomy back to people to be able to do 2 things. One's called Deel Travel and one's called Deel Dinners. So Deel Dinners is like the casual, you go get drinks, you get a hamburger. If you want to do it over Zoom, go for it. You can order food in, whatever, have a drink, but it's meant for people to go take a train, get together with people that either they're missing or they happen to be just traveling or whatever. And so we do that in Q2 and then Q4. The Q4 one's usually they do big holiday dinners with it, but very heavily utilize perks. And then our other one is Deel Travel. So we give everyone $1,200 a year to be able to say, look, you don't need an offsite. If you want to use it for offsite money to get together with a team that isn't otherwise doing an offsite, great. But we see so many teams just getting together like, hey, I just want to get these few people together, or maybe a manager, and they just use Deel Travel to do that. But again, it's don't overthink it. It's totally autonomous. It's up to them to figure out like how they want to spend those funds and with whom. But we're going into our 2nd year of offering the Deel Travel, our 3rd year of offering the Deel Dinners, and it's a very highly utilized perk.
I love that. I love that it straddles both in person and virtual, right? You're kind of leaning into both. That's a great suggestion. All right. I have one last question for our amazing group of panelists. We've talked a lot about remote work, hybrid work, strategies. This one's just more about you as a leader. So I would love everyone to share with our audience, what is a mantra or a phrase or advice, something that is really close to your heart that you live by, that it's something that you hold dear and has helped you in your career get to this point so far?
Maybe mine's funny. It's from my mother, who's also in human resources and a chief people officer for my whole time growing up. And one thing she said to me when I first started my career in HR consulting was, if you haven't killed anyone, it can be fixed. You're going to make mistakes. If you've killed someone, it's just going to take a little bit longer. And I think that always just stood with me, of course, in jest. But I think, yes, everyone's going to make mistakes. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to take the learnings. But I think the most important part is understanding why it went wrong, and then being able to be transparent and really think about the people with intentionality of how you're going to fix something. And I think I've just always taken that with me, to be transparent, be direct. We made a mistake, we own it, and how can we best move it forward with everyone feeling good and not breaking any trust.
I love that. I can picture you as a teenager walking in and telling your mom, well, I have good news. Here's what I didn't do, Mom. Stephanie or Jim, what about you?
Casey, your mom sounds like a legend. I want to meet. So mine comes from on my first day of onboarding. I was at LinkedIn for a few years, and on day one, the number 2 at the company, Mike Gamson, shared with all of our hiring class. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you leave us. We want to make sure that this time that we have together, however long it is going to be so impactful that it will get you to a wonderful spot for whatever that next season is. That amount of freedom that it gave almost everybody to think about where they're at in their career and not feel obligated to be where they're at, but choosing to be where they're at and making it the best of, has lived with me for the last 10 years. And so I oftentimes, if an employee is struggling to think about, I don't know what I want to do, and it's give us your best, we'll give you our best. And when that time comes, that's great, because we want to know that we were a launching pad or a platform for you to get where you need to be. So those were the advice that I got that has stuck with me.
I love that. It's such a framing shift, right? Just to think about it, that I think probably unlocks so much more and releases a lot of pressure. Thank you for sharing. Jim, how about you? Close us out.
So from my first director, when I first became a leader of people at Google, you can be so consumed by all of the information that has to flow through you as a leader and always be on. You've got to take yourself away from it. But before you get home to your family or anything else, you've got to create that space for you to be able to think. Because if you can't think, then you're useless as a leader. You've got to be able to carve out that space, isolate yourself away, and actually do some deep thinking every now and again, because otherwise you won't be as effective as you need to be.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Well, I'm going to pop open here the final discussion points. We've gone through these. We did our Q&A. I just want to put in a plug for our upcoming episodes. So we have episode 9, 10, and 11. We have HR transformations, AI's role in redefining the HR landscape. That's coming up in May. In June, we have building compensation models, which I think is going to be really, really interesting. There's so much new data there, and the role that AI is playing in how we think about compensation and how it's changing the market will be fascinating. And then in July, join us for the future of HR leadership, architects of business strategy. I wanted to thank again GoLinks, our GoProfiles, GoSearch. They have so many amazing products, and we're just really grateful that companies like this continue to make our way of life easier, and then also allow us to make new friends and new peers today and have these really interesting discussions. So on behalf of GoLinks, just wanted to say thank you to our amazing panelists, Stephanie, Casey, and Jim. And thank you for all of you who were joining us today. We hope to see you next time. Take care, everyone.